Lessons in Attachment is the podcast where I am talking openly and honestly about some of the key challenges so many of us face in love, dating, and relationships, especially when we relate to having an anxious and/or avoidant attachment style. I'm Carly Ann. I'm a somatic practitioner with a focus on attachment and self-esteem. Driven by my own journey of doing the inner work on healing the past and becoming more secure, this podcast is where you will find top healing tips, other people's lessons in love, and a community of people just like you and just like me that are determined to break the cycle of insecure attachment. I truly believe that everyone deserves a healthy love in their lifetime. Hello and welcome back to Lessons in Attachment. I guess this is kind of like a bonus episode. I'm releasing it on a day that's not a Sunday. Still going to be releasing the Sunday ones, but it's just when I have some time, when I have some inspiration, I am basically going to take that opportunity and share more with you because I just really want to use this platform as much as I can, really. So yeah, that's why if you're a regular listener, that's why there is an extra episode. If you're not a regular episode, if you're not a regular listener, probably you're not even going to know that. But today, this extra episode, we're diving into a crucial topic when it comes to attachment styles. We're going to be talking about core wounds, particularly those associated with anxiety. I tend to focus mostly on anxious attachment. All the attachment styles have anxiety within them, absolutely. But this is just who I tend to connect with the most, who tends to connect with my community the most. So I'm open to doing other content and things like that if you just reach out and let me know that that is what you need. But if you're someone who feels that constant need for reassurance, worries about being abandoned, or find yourself in cycles of anxiety, cycles of not feeling good enough, then this episode is for you. We're going to talk through understanding core wounds and really think about the impact that these have on your life, the impact it has on your overall well-being. I'm also going to help you to identify your core wounds. Some of you may be more aware of this than others. And we're going to finish the episode with a reflective exercise to help you to consider your core wounds and just give that some attention today. So I guess as a first step, it's always quite useful for you to turn inwards a little bit. So just ask yourself, just hearing the words core wounds, what does that bring up for me? Do I notice any feelings, any knowing, any images, any thoughts that arise? And, as we go through this episode, you may well know some of this, and some of it may be brand new and aha moments. Just take in whatever you experience. And, for me, it's always an honor to have you here. I know that it might mean that you're going through something difficult or have been through difficult times, especially when it comes to your relationship with yourself and with other people. And so, yeah, I'm mindful of that. And it's like a privilege, really, to be here with you. I'm Carly Ann. My approach really begins with the assumption that your secure self is within you and is ready to lead. We just need to get to that self. If you've ever felt stuck in relationships, battled with anxiety and feeling stuck, or simply you yearn for a deeper understanding of yourself, then my support, this podcast, might be just what you need. There's over 150 episodes for you to dive into. Some of you are going to be really keen to know that I have 10 more spaces as I'm recording this, 10 more spaces on my course. We're doing the 4th round, which is so exciting. There's already 5 of you, and even just that 5, like I feel connected to, even those 5 of you, I can't wait for you to be with me throughout those 10 weeks. I really want to support you as a team together and to really consider what you need individually as well. And for those of you considering joining us, Becoming Secure is a practical course guiding you to overcome overthinking, attachment triggers, and painful patterns. I've divided it into 4 crucial parts based on attachment science. That's really, really key. I don't want to take up too much time here in this episode, but you can get all the details in the description. Part one will be looking at your blocks so far, looking at what's important to you, your goals. It's really going to help you to get clear on your relationship and uncover emotional blocks, uncover what's kept you stuck in your anxious pattern so far, and look at, well, how can we move towards who we are? How can we move towards that secure self? Part two is all about reducing your anxiety and those reactive behaviors. So, really managing your triggers, really understanding your thoughts, the overthinking, the behaviors that can sabotage our relationship. So, this was where it's all very experiential. So, each session you are participating, you're taking part in exercises. That's really, really key for becoming secure. Part three is the one that people often jump straight into, whereas we're going to do that from about about session 7 onwards. This is the inner child work and healing the past. So this is where we turn our focus to healing those deeper wounds from your past. Both part 2 and part 3 are very much about what's going on in your subconscious, basically, and bringing that safely to the forefront so that you can create long-term change. So I know part 3, the inner child work, is what lots of you actually crave, but it's important that we do the foundational steps before that as well. And part 4 is very much about embodying secure attachment and sustaining long-term relationships, something that anxious attachers really struggle with. So this part of the course will really have you embodying the principles of secure attachment. You're really going to be integrating what you've learned in your day-to-day, as well as we will be looking at green flags in relationships. We will be understanding your needs and how to communicate them effectively. We want you to develop the skills necessary to sustain a long-term healthy relationship. So that's becoming secure. Like I say, 10 spaces available now. What we're looking at in this episode, I would say it definitely drives all 4 parts. It's your core wounds, but where I really intentionally am going to support you to look at your core wounds and how they're driving you and how we can manage that in your day-to-day life will be in part 2 of becoming secure. But whether you're joining that or not, because of course there's thousands of you listening and there's only 10 more spaces. So I really want this episode to be powerful for you as well. I want you to be able to listen to this episode and understand yourself more, have an idea of how you can do some reflective work on this, because that's really important. So let's talk about what your core wounds are. They are like deep inner injuries, I would say, that have shaped how we view ourselves and the world around us. Often, not always, but often, our core wounds develop in early childhood when our attachment styles are formed. That's why many of you know that I have a newborn baby, and it is so powerful for me to see a lot of this like in action, a lot of how we take in the world from those early days, and to think that our attachment styles, how we feel and view relationships is formed at that young age. It's that there's a lot of things we've experienced that we cannot remember. So it really shows how much is going on within our subconscious beneath the surface. Our core wounds influence our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors, particularly when it comes to your most intimate relationships. So they really play out in adulthood in your romantic relationships. So the core wounds that you experienced in your earlier years, they tend to play out the most as an adult in your romantic relationship. So if you're someone who is always like, well, why am I fine in all my other relationships? Why is it that I've got such a great network of friends, and I thrive at work, but yet when it comes to relationships, romantic relationships, I don't recognize myself. That is one of the reasons. Now, I really want to normalize core wounds here. This is not an anxious attachment thing. Everyone has them. They're not in any way a sign of weakness. They are a reflection of our early experiences and the meaning that was attached to them, and not through choice. The key is not to eliminate them. It's not to get rid of them. It's not to ignore them, because they are part of who we are. We carry them with us. But to understand them to heal them and to learn how to manage them so that they no longer control us. We want to be the ones in control of our lives, right? You want to be in the driver's seat of your life. I'm sure of that. So different attachment styles, they tend to show up with certain core wounds. This is what I love about attachment styles, is there does tend to be a lot of themes. So for those with anxious attachment that I'm looking at inside Becoming Secure, for example, and with lots of people that I work with or inside the membership, these core wounds, they often, well, nearly always, but they often revolve around feelings of unworthiness in some way, in some form or another. There is something in you that doesn't feel good enough, that feels unworthy, a fear of abandonment, and a deep-seated belief that you're not enough as you are. Some common wounds when it comes to anxious attachment that you might have heard of already, they include: I'm not lovable, I'm not enough, this person will abandon me, or I must work hard to make others love me. I must be perfect in order for people to stay. So it's very much these wounds around being abandoned, not being enough, feeling like people don't stay, that you're bad, and you really want to be recognizing what are those wounds within me that show up, because they impact you. These wounds that we walk around with, that we're carrying, if we don't address them, they have a significant impact on. And let's think about this now. Let's move in now and think about the impact of core wounds. So they impact how you think. My background is in cognitive behavioral therapy, so I do a lot of work with people around negative thinking, around overthinking, the automatic thoughts that we have. And our core wounds really drive our automatic thoughts, which impacts how we feel. If we're thinking negatively about ourselves or about this relationship and expecting bad things to happen, that really impacts how we feel, because we feel sad, we feel drained, we feel disheartened, we feel scared. And our feelings, they drive what we do. Now, you might consciously know, I don't want to reach out to this person. You might consciously know, I want to give my partner some space right now. But when our core wounds are activated, that can become and feel near impossible if we're not aware of how to recognize them, be with them, manage them. So when we're triggered, it can lead to thoughts like, they're going to leave me, I'm too much for them, I need to make them stay. And of course, that's going to impact what you do. So what tends to happen when you're having those thoughts is that's when the clinginess, that neediness that we talk of and that we feel to sometimes an intense level, that really, really takes over, because they generate the fear, the insecurity. And the reality is, and the sadness about it is that they often do push people away. Now, sometimes that turns out to be great, because the person you're pursuing anyway has nothing to give you. But there are times where it's not great, because there's potential in this relationship, or it is actually quite a healthy relationship when your anxiety isn't triggered. So, and obviously deciphering between those two is something that, yeah, is key, basically. So the actions like clinginess, constant reassurance seeking, becoming overly accommodating at the expense of yourself, they not only push people away, but they hurt you. They're a form of self-abandonment. And that's where things really change, is when we stop abandoning ourselves, right? So you've got to think, these wounds. Maybe the more that I'm talking, you're recognizing these fears, these wounds that show up in you. And believe it or not, a lot of the time we're really trying to avoid them. So we're doing everything we can to feel lovable. We're doing everything we can not to be abandoned. We're doing everything that we can to feel good enough. So whatever your wound is, we're often doing everything we can to stop that getting activated. even if it means that we lose our dignity, it hurts us, we don't recognize ourselves. And so it's almost like this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where the fear of abandonment often brings about the behaviors that increases the likelihood of us not feeling good enough, that increases the likelihood of us feeling unlovable. And so we just end up in this cycle. So the big question is, a lot of the time, and a lot of the work that I do with people, and this can be at the start of working together, it can, unfold throughout our relationship together. One of the most effective ways to really be identifying your core wounds is definitely by paying attention to your triggers. And, our triggers hurt us. And it's not like we want to be triggered, but they're there. We're in this moment of our lives. So those moments when you feel a sudden surge of negative emotion, of the panic, the insecurity, whatever it is that takes over you personally, we want to pay attention to that. Those moments, by examining them closely and asking yourself, what am I actually afraid of here? What is this situation bringing up in me? What about the past is influencing this? You can start to uncover the underlying core wounds. And we do dive deeper into this process in the second part of Becoming Secure. It starts in October, remember that. So do check out the description. In this course, Becoming Secure 4.0, we actually work on activating the subconscious mind, of course, in a safe therapeutic way. I feel the need to say that, to uncover and support you to heal these wounds. How do we live with, our anxious attachment? How do we live with these wounds? Because they color our world and they can make relationships so difficult. So, how do we live with that? And we uncover that and we start to think about, how can I move on? How can I stop these impacting me every single day, every single relationship? It's because, it's our relationship. And even though we can feel like we're thriving, like I was saying at the beginning, when we really dig deep into these wounds, it is our relationship with our colleagues, with how we show up at work, with how we are with our habits. It's even our relationship with money. If you have an anxious attachment, you probably have an anxious attachment with money as well. It goes across our lives. And so it's a powerful, powerful journey that helps you move towards a more secure attachment style when you're able to activate your subconscious core wounds that are driving, the thoughts, the feelings, the actions. Your triggers and your suffering, they aren't just random, they're clues. They're clues. If you can go beneath the surface to your unconscious mind, which I can help you to do, or I'm going to give you a reflective exercise in a moment, you can start to reveal the core wounds that are driving your anxious attachment. And awareness is the first step towards healing. Now, if you are thinking, wow, how do I heal? What even is healing? I actually want you to go back and listen to my previous episode about it's called The Truth About Healing Anxious Attachment. It's before this episode you're listening to. It's really important to hear that, because sometimes we are living in a world where there are messages of people clearing your trauma, getting rid of your anxiety. You're going to think amazingly. You're going to be completely secure, and that can really make things difficult. So after this episode, have a listen to that as well. But let's dive into, for now, the reflective exercise. You can grab a pen, grab your favorite notebook, and really dive into this. Or if you're walking right now, obviously if you're driving, just come back to it later. Then you might reflect on it mentally, or you can, just save it. And I don't know, you know what I'm getting at. Do what you need to do to go through these kind of probably about 5 to 6 steps. So I'm going to guide you through this exercise to help you start identifying your own core wounds. I want you to first, you've probably already done this in this episode, but recall a recent trigger. Think back to a recent situation where you felt a strong reaction. anxiety, fear in a relationship, a situationship. It could be something your partner said, a moment where you felt ignored, a time where you were left waiting. Like, think of a time where you felt triggered. And you want to describe that situation. What happened? Who was involved? How did it make you feel? What were the urges within you? What did your body want to do in that moment? Now, I want you to take a bit more time with this next one. I want you to recognize your automatic thoughts. So I want you to jot down the first thoughts that came to your mind when this situation happened. What did you think about yourself? What did you think about the situation, the other person involved? What were those first thoughts? When you've got those first thoughts, that's when you can begin to ask the deeper questions. What was the deeper fear or belief that this situation might have been really tapping into? So, if you were thinking, um, this person's not messaging me back, you might just ask yourself, what is it about that I'm so afraid of? What am I making this mean? If you're getting, you notice that you were really worried that your partner was upset with you. What's my biggest fear about that? With these deeper questions, you want to be asking yourself, what does this say about how I see myself, about relationships, about my self-worth? You really want to be digging just a little bit deeper than those automatic thoughts. And then in that fifth step, we can connect to the core wound. Try to identify a core wound that this fear or belief might be related to. Is it a fear of abandonment? Is it a fear that you're not lovable, you're not good enough? Is it a fear of being lonely? Is it a fear of being bad? What tends to come up when you ask those deeper questions? Now, the bit that I actually recommend, the sixth step, I really do recommend if you're in therapy or, on becoming secure, I will be there to do this with people, is reflecting on the origin. I do feel like it's good to have support. If you've done enough self-help work, if you've had enough support around you, if you feel in a grounded space, then of course, reflect on what this wound might be relating back to. Is there a particular experience in your childhood, a pattern in your early relationships? You don't need to have all the answers right now. Just allow yourself to explore. Sometimes we can't remember these things until we're doing the inner work. Sometimes we may never remember them, but we can reflect, we can consider. But the key thing is that we know what that wound is. And sometimes we have to do, on becoming secure, there's really only one space left for this because two of you have already taken it. But for the one-to-one part, for those of you that signed up for the one-to-one option, we will be looking at that origin. Where has this started? We'll be using a specific exercise to bridge you back to the past safely, so that we can consider that together, especially if you're not sure. But yeah, anyway, that's obviously very specific, but this exercise is a starting point. The more you practice it, the more you're going to uncover about your core wounds and how they influence your attachment and how you're showing up in relationships. Okay, guys, I am Carly Ann. As I said at the beginning, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining me today. It's, these are important topics. They're not easy sometimes to think about, to consider. So do take care of yourself. Do offer yourself lots of love, no judgment. Everyone has core wounds, and by understanding them, you take your first step towards developing a more secure attachment style, towards exercising your secure attachment. If you found today's episode helpful, please like, subscribe, do all of the things, because it helps us to reach more people who might also benefit from this, just like you and just like me. Don't forget about becoming secure. It starts in October. If you're listening after this, then maybe you want to go and see when I'm running it next, or if I'm running it next, or check out the Attachment Recovery Gym. Follow me on Instagram, carly.ann_, and just go and dive into the podcast where we dive into lots of different concepts around healing anxious attachment. Remember, guys, I believe that everyone deserves a healthy, happy love in their lifetime, and I'm here to support you every step of the way. So until next time, take care of yourself, and I will be back here with more very soon.